I think it's awesome we're getting to talk with you. Your name is Charlese Antoinette, and you are you have a crazy life story. I think it was amazing that I think noticed this one tweet which spawned like a interest in like us communicating, which makes us now here today. But yeah, you mentioned on your Twitter timeline something that really spoke to me about your personal journey through your career, and I took a lot away from that. Like just one 240 character packed emotional journey of like I could feel in the moment of like what you were going through at when you wrote it. It was very clear that like at that time something had really changed your day, and it was obviously that the movie that you worked on was nominated for an Oscar, which is Judas and the Black Messiah. Obviously the big talk of the Oscar season, and we're all, a lot of us, I think most of us have seen it. I hope, if not, you should check it out. But yeah, like, so I saw the tweet. Part of that you mentioned in that tweet is how you were homeless, and I want to talk about that. First off, I'm gonna let you speak, but okay. So tell me a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how we're talking today.
Sure.
Let's start from there, I guess.
Sure.
It's a good segue.
My name is Charlese Antoinette, and I'm a costume designer. And as Eli mentioned, one of my most recent projects was nominated for an Academy Award. I moved to LA, I think in like 2013. And I moved here with the intent of, expanding and, becoming a bi-coastal costume designer. I had, at that point, I had 2 films that went to Sundance and had done like, fairly well. And so I was like, oh, it's time for me to move to LA and, get representation, like work in LA, because LA is a different town than New York, when it comes to film and production. So I came here with a goal in mind, and that's how I ended up here. And, and things just happened during that time that I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't like prepared for how, in my opinion, how segregated Hollywood is here, and how difficult it was for me to get work when I first got here. I was also in a relationship that was emotionally and financially abusive. And so by the time that relationship ended, like he had spent all my money. And so that's how I ended up homeless. And what ended up happening, and which is why, you reached out to me, was I had a moment of deep reflection, and it was brought on, I don't know if this is appropriate, one, by doing plant medicine.
No, it's fine. I mean, look, we all have different situations, and we're not like here to talk about exactly what our whatever. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
But I had a healing ceremony, and I did some plant medicine, and it allowed me to do some really deep diving and deep reflection on my journey, and honestly reclaiming my power and acknowledging my power, and changing my own life. And how I think I wrote that tweet because I was like, I need to acknowledge what I did for myself.
Right.
Like I need to acknowledge that I did the work and I pushed through it. You know what I mean? And that needs to be acknowledged. And along the way, I definitely did have help, but I think a lot of times we diminish how powerful we truly are. You know, we give away our power in so many different ways, and so many subtle ways. And sometimes it's just like the smallest little action, the reaching out to someone, just doing small things add up to you being able to like move forward in a big way. And you don't even realize it, as it's happening. And I'm kind of like getting off track.
No, let's start. Look, I feel the real like energy that you still have after all of that, and it's awesome. So you're clearly still, you know, in a space where you can talk about it and comfortable talking about it. So tell me, take me back to the beginning.
Yeah.
So when did you start? First off, where did you start before you got your first job in Hollywood? What were you doing? Yeah.
So I started my career in New York. Or you want to hear about how I grew up and stuff first?
Yeah, let's start there. Where did you grow up, actually?
Yeah. So I grew up in the DC area, and I grew up like in this, you know, suburban Maryland, where everyone like works for the government, has a government job, you know. So it wasn't like a super creative environment, you know. Like my parents, I believe my parents were artists at heart.
Okay.
You know.
Do you have like a creative like mom or somebody who was like really like, because I for example, neither of my parents are in the arts, but like both my parents are very creative at heart too, but like definitely had that passion. Is that something that you're saying they had, that like that fuel that you learned from?
I think they like passed it down to me, and I think the way the world is enabled me for me to be able to act on it in ways that they weren't able to.
Okay.
You know, because both my parents didn't grow up in like the easiest home environments. Okay. You know, they didn't grow up with a lot of money. Yeah. There was a lot of abuse in both my parents' households. So like their way of like doing better and surviving was to like get, you know, government jobs, get stable jobs. You know what I mean? Like they were just like, they didn't even have like the capacity to think about like being artists and making art and making money from art.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. Like they just didn't have the capacity for it. And I think, but I do think like my parents were artists at heart, because I see things that they would do in like their personal time, and like, you know, and my mom's very creative. She paints now, like for she says for her therapy. Oh, she's awesome. Actually a really dope painter, and I've been trying to like convince her to do a show, and she's just like, no, you know. So that's what I mean by like both my parents were artists at heart, but like because of the way the world is, and you know, particularly growing up in like, you know, the 60s and 70s as Black people in the DC area and all the riots and everything that was going on during that time, my mom was bused. Like, she was a part of desegregation, so she has a lot of like racial trauma that she lives with to this day, being a child and being spit at and cursed at. You know what I'm saying? So like, like there was no room for her to think about being an artist. She was just like, I'm getting a job. Like she was just in survival mode her whole life, basically, you know? That's
so crazy to think about. Like, cause about the movie though, because I'm thinking about the people that worked on it and the crew. And I mean, from what I know, and that, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was predominantly an African-American crew. Like there was no. Oh, okay.
Not predominantly.
But at least a lot of the principals were, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, the cast, yes.
But the cast, yes. But are you telling me that like behind the scenes it wasn't?
No.
Oh, okay.
And it's just because of where we were working. We were working in Cleveland. Okay. And you know, most of the people on the production who were working behind the scenes were from other places like LA or New York, and things like that.
So they didn't make it like a point to like hire like those voices to be part of it. Not to say that there's anything wrong with having a crew that's of all types, but
you know, it's tricky. You know what I mean? Like when you're working in a city where, you know, you have to hire union people, and the only union people in that city are that's and your production's telling you that's the only people you can hire.
Right, but I know the writers, the director.
The writers, the director. Yeah. Our three main, you know, our three producers. Right. You know, myself, the hair stylist, key hairstylist. You know, we're all Black people, people of color. Right. Our EP who was at Warner Brothers at the time was a person of color. And that was major. I mean, I'm not going to diminish the fact that in itself is a big deal, because it is. Right. But because of that, everyone thinks everyone else was also.
I mean, listen to me,
And I'm like, no, it's, you know, it's still. The diversity is still a huge problem in Hollywood. That's all I'm going to say.
Interesting.
It still is. It is.
No, I mean, hey, look, that's fascinating.
Even with that,
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, we're still having the conversation around Oscar season still about diversity. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that even just like last year, maybe it was the Golden Globes, there wasn't a single female nominated for director.
Mhm.
Like, it was like, it's crazy. It's crazy that we're still in this climate where, like, yeah, like Hollywood is definitely not fully in a, even though all the talk, you know, Hollywood's the most progressive, you know, Hollywood's the most, literally, there's no other, there's no more progressive like industry in terms of at least the voices. Like, but yeah, no, what I was thinking originally was I was thinking in the context of how your family
Mm-hmm.
grew up
Mm-hmm.
in that environment, and there must have been that feeling on set. Is if did you feel like you felt like you were in sort of like your parents' shoes of like seeing what growing up like that must have been like?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know if they're Black Panthers, but
No, I don't have any familial ties to the Panther Party, but ideologically, like my parents are very pro-Black, you know, and I grew up in a very like, you know, Black is beautiful, Black is power. Like, you know, I was very aware of who I was and my history as a Black person, you know, and my parents definitely like educated me in various ways about what it means to be Black. And some of the ways weren't the best because, again, when we talk about like reclaiming power, right? You know, a lot of it was just like, this is how it is and this is what you have to endure and blah, 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 blah. And
so like putting a stamp on it, like before you got to authentically get to that thought. I hear you.
So, you know, and we have to be careful about doing that. You know, we have to be careful about talking about being Black as an experience and you know, and teaching our kids from like a negative perspective where it's like, you know, and it's not that you don't prepare children for the world, it's just how you have the conversation, you know what I mean? Because there's a way to have the conversation where they still feel empowered about who they are, and they just are like they just are aware that like some people are just stupid. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean you're any less beautiful or amazing. You know, this is how you have the conversation. And I think
we're all, you know, God's creatures. I understand that. So going back to the childhood side of it, though, how did you get that spark to want to, like, completely having no context of what the creative industries are like, get to that, like, making that your life? Like, what gave you that inspiration?
I mean, it's really hard to say because, like I said, I didn't have like any examples. I think I just felt like
media. Was it just media, or?
I think it was something that was in me, and I just felt like I didn't have a choice. It was like, if I don't do this, I'm gonna be miserable. You know what I mean?
You just grew up knowing that, like, creative,
just whatever creative thing it was. I wasn't exactly sure it was costume design at the time. I just knew when I was creating, I was happy. And my childhood was hard. Like there weren't many moments of joy. You know, like my parents ended up getting divorced, and a lot of other stuff happened, and so. But I knew when I was creating and when I was creating with my friends, I was happy. And I was like, I want to just do that all the time. I want to create with my friends all the time. And at the time, me and my friends had a clothing line, and our clothing line consisted of us like thrift shopping and buying old things and remixing them. Just, you know, at the time, like deconstructed denim was like the thing you do.
What year is this?
This was like late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay.
You know, we would make outfits and go to parties, and like we had business cards, and we were like gonna do it. So that's how I ended up going to fashion school. Okay. Yeah, it was because me and my friends had our clothing line in high school.
What city?
We were in Gaithersburg, so like right outside of DC, like 45 minutes.
That's where you went to fashion school?
Well, sorry, I went to college in Philadelphia. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of the big city there.
Yeah. Okay. So I went from suburban Maryland to Philly, and that was fun. And that's when I realized I love cities. Okay. And I was like, I'm never living in the suburbs again.
All right, gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I probably would have that same realization, although I grew up in LA. But I get it. Yeah. So then you're in a big city. You're in a fashion school. What's that experience like of going to a big city and then realizing there's a fashion industry? Like, tell me, did that make it more, was there more pressure on you at that point, or what are you feeling right then?
I didn't feel pressure. I was just like realizing how many opportunities and how many different lanes that I could go down. Yeah. And I didn't even realize all of them at that point. At that point, I was learning about the fashion industry. So it's like, you could be a buyer, you know, you can own a showroom, you could, do product development. You could
Right.
do, apparel merchandise management. Like, so it was very, very, very like fashion industry specific, very corporate,
So you're trying to figure out like, how do I make a living?
Right.
Which is like
With my
different than being
creativity.
like an auteur or like Virgil. Like you're trying to like,
Yeah.
how do I find a lane where I can sustain this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did you first land on? Like, what was your original idea?
I was going to do fashion merchandising and marketing. Because like everybody in my life, and I always wanted to be a designer, but everybody in my life, because of like my background, of all the economic insecurity that my family experienced, they're like, do something safe, get a business degree,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
And I was like, in my mind, but I was like, I want to design,
Right.
I always wanted to design. And so I went to school, I got a fashion merchandising degree. I graduated. I ended up working in New York, and that's what got me to New York. I got a job that relocated me from Philly to New York. They recruited
Right
me
out
out
of
of
college.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
so you got recruited out of, and what were you doing to get a recruit? Because like that shows that you must have had some skill or talent that was clearly showing. What were you doing to show that to people?
I had like a really high, had a high GPA, and it was also it was a program. It was a diversity program, actually. Macy's came to my school.
It was Macy's?
Yep,
Okay.
Yeah, they came to my school to recruit diverse, candidates and interview us. So, and there was also an organization called BRAG, the Black Retail Action Group. I did their internship the summer before I graduated with Macy's. So this was an organization that set out to tackle diversity in the fashion industry because it's a problem there as well. Yeah. And so that's how I ended up getting my opportunity to move to New York, was through organizations like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So they relocated you. They paid for the move.
Yep.
So you're getting an entry level position, and is
making
it an
like
entry level?
$30,000.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's okay.
In New York City.
In New York City. So it's like,
this is 2005.
So it's like dope. You paid for me to come to like the most expensive city in the world where I can't afford to like buy a slice of pizza, but thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I was making like maybe $800 a week, if that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And
wow.
My rent with my roommate was like $1,300 a month.
Oh my God.
It was 2005.
Yeah. That's insane.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I did it and I had a great time.
How long was your commute? Like, what are you doing to like get to work each day?
The
like,
metro, the MTA.
2 hours, like through a different part of town. Like, because I'm assuming it has to be like in a really nice, like crazy part of the city, right? Like,
I mean, Midtown. It was by Madison Square Garden.
Okay.
It wasn't that fancy.
Okay. But
very
yeah.
corporate.
Okay. Word. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like in that area, whatever. In New York, like I'm sure a condo or like just like a 500 square foot apartment is like $3,000 a month. You know what I mean? Like, so you're making ends meet. Okay. So you have the job at Macy's. Where do you go from there? Like, how did you get
from that to the
what's the ladder? What's the ladder? Yeah. That's what I think the question then would be.
It's a long story full of many twists and turns. So
it doesn't have to be immediately to like working on an Oscar nominated movie, but like I'm just saying, like, how did you go from that to like thinking, okay, what was the next job?
I worked at Macy's. I lasted maybe 5 months and I was like, corporate fashion isn't for me.
Okay.
And then I took some classes at FIT because I was like, well, I think I want to be a stylist. And I had learned about what a stylist does when I was in college watching Style Network at night. Okay. They would interview people like Robert Verdi, who was at the time Halle Berry's stylist, and he was huge. He was like one of the most famous stylists at the time. This is, like I said, the early to mid 2000s.
Okay.
So
no Instagram, nothing.
No Instagram. Yeah. No Instagram.
Nothing to like really like highlight, because like now I feel like you can flex on Instagram and like show your designs, like do things that's kind of like a portfolio that gets you. Okay. So.
Yeah. No Instagram. I think like we were using I was using Craigslist a lot to find styling gigs, and find photographers to like shoot with. Mm-hmm. Like, we were using Craigslist a lot.
So are you literally linking and building, and you're like, I'm going to link and build.
Yeah.
And you somehow find your way to like meeting people. Yeah.
That's literally what it was. It was like me posting on Craigslist or like responding to stylists looking for assistance on Craigslist. Wow. Like it was very, very, very hard. Or like,
Sounds crazy.
Yeah, it was.
I mean,
a
it's also
little
kind of
wild.
sketch. Like, it could be really okay. So you're just putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
That's the crux of it.
Yeah,
You're like, I'm gonna take this leap to like make it in this industry, which is
Mm-hmm.
hustle, which is motivation, which is just having the drive to like put everything and take a risk.
Yeah.
And like you're in a big city.
Yep.
Came from a suburban town, and now you're. So when did you get your next like steady job? Like, what was the next steady, or was there a steady job in between?
I have not worked a steady job like for real since probably 2008. I did a couple of gigs after I left Macy's, so I was like a sales specialist in a luxury sunglass brand. And I did that for a while, and then I did mainly retail jobs to allow me the flexibility to do styling gigs at the time and assist people at a moment's notice, things like that.
Gotcha.
So I worked at H&M doing visual merchandising for a while. That was like my longest job.
Is that like, that's kind of corporate, but like you're not going into an office, but like you're working on the corporate.
Store.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. It's like a more of a salary, not salary position, but you're not working on the retail floor. You come. I had a set schedule, so I would come in at 7 a.m., leave at 3 p.m., and was responsible for cleaning up the store and making the sections look nice and stuff like that. So
gotcha.
That's what I did the longest, but I kept getting passed up for a promotion there. And I was like, I think it's time to leave. And I'm glad I did, because that's how I got in. After that, my life led me to the film industry.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like making that decision, because I was like, you know what, I'm going to leave, because I felt like I needed to open up my life to do what I really wanted to do. And it was film. And I was like, if I want to do this, I have to be available. Because that's the thing. And that's why, like, it gets tricky. And, going back to the homelessness conversation.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
To work in these industries, like, you actually have to have money, because you have to like be available at a moment's notice, to take jobs, especially when you're first starting out.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that if you're full-time and employed. Like, I get a lot of people who want to break into the business, and they talk to me and they're just like, but I have to work full-time, like freelance isn't for everybody, it's really hard. Like, I've had some really challenging times because I've like sacrificed and wanted to do this as a career. But it's like,
I think we the narrative around that is really shifting recently. The fact that when you have to be an assistant in Hollywood in order to get anywhere in Hollywood, almost. I mean, yes, like nepotism plays a role, but that's also, you're not. So my point being, though, to break through in Hollywood, you have to almost be like a slave. Like you're getting like $10, like $12 an hour, like. You're somebody's like literal, like, you're just going to like go get coffee for like 5 years. And then basically, I've heard that there's been a lot of initiatives recently about how do we create better, like unionizing assistants, or like, there's a podcast, I don't know if you're familiar with it also, but of like writers that are talking about, they have assistants, I think, come on the podcast, but they share anonymously, I think, the stories. I'm probably butchering this, but long story short is, we know that Hollywood has this issue where, and I think we know it disproportionately must affect people of color, because historically people of color come from lower economic backgrounds. And that's the problem with creating more diversity in Hollywood, is you have this system that enables those with privilege to keep regurgitating back into it. And so how do you fix that, right? So for you're telling me that you come from having to work a full-time job, having to pay your way to get to a place where you can finance the years that it took to like break through. So what is that first job that really gets you to that level? Like, what was that?
The first movie?
Or commercial or anything. Like, what gets you into Hollywood? What gets you in that door?
Yeah, so I started assisting, and the first job I ever worked as an assistant, I interned and I worked for free because I didn't have any connections to this industry. And I was like, I don't know how to get a job.
Yeah.
And someone asked me to intern. And at the time I was doing a part-time job just to make ends meet and making myself so I could be available during the day. Right.
Yeah.
And one of those jobs was like cocktail waitressing on the weekend. So I literally would work 7 days a week at one point when I was breaking into the industry.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, my cocktail waitressing job like covered like my rent and bills. And then during the week I was interning for free. And then when
who are you interning for?
So my first internship was on a Michael Douglas film.
Okay.
Yeah, it was called Solitary Man. Jenny Gehring was one of the costume designers, and also Ella Mirajnik from Bridgerton.
Okay, so it didn't deter you though that you're like not getting paid.
No, because it was my way in.
Right.
I was working with costume designers. You know what I mean? And I'd
Mm-hmm.
never, and people whose work I was familiar with, like Ella Mirajnik has done like every Michael Douglas film he had ever done till that point, basically. Like Wall Street and Fatal Attraction and like all of that. So I knew who she was, and I was like, I'll work for free. How else am I going to get in this industry?
Right. At no point were you like, this is so messed up. Like for years, like I'm never going to actually get to a point where I'm sustaining this, or did you always know there was a light at the end?
I knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel because one time I looked at my boss's check and I saw how much they made. Oh my God. And it wasn't Ellen. I didn't look at your check, Ellen. It was someone else.
Okay.
Because I wanted to know how much do they get paid?
Yeah.
And this was on my first paid job where that happened.
God. How do you get access to that? Like, what was the
situation? I pick up. One of my jobs was to pick up the paychecks and give my boss
as an intern.
Paycheck.
You're like getting the mail or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like you do every administrative task. You get food, you get coffee. Like you drive. Like one of my jobs was literally to drive a costume designer around and wait for him wherever he went in New York. That was one of my jobs, and I was happy to do it because I was getting to be a part of the process, and I was learning about the process of costume design through driving him all over and talking to him and watching him work, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I looked at one of my boss's checks and I was like, oh wow, they make what I make in a week, in a day. Because at this point I was getting paid.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, I can get to that. So how many years did it take you then to get to a place where you're actually making a real job out of it? Oh
God. Okay. Till I was making what that boss was getting paid.
Yeah, just like when did you get to a place where you're like, okay, there's a momentum. I'm not giving up on this journey. Like I'm not going back to like being, in retail. Like
okay, I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because honestly, it really wasn't until 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, like because from the time I started, it has been really hard. I'm not like it's been really, really hard from the time I started my career. And it has been a lot of moments of like economic insecurity, in that process, like not being able to get hired for work. And particularly when I moved to LA, I didn't have this problem when I lived in New York. And that's what caused me to deduce like there's a serious race issue here, because I was like, I have the same resume,
Right.
So like, what's the problem? And I realized like a lot of, Black designers only work on quote unquote Black shows. And in New York, I didn't feel that way. I felt like I worked on everything. I mean, even when I started designing in New York, I felt like I had opportunities to do many different types of projects. It wasn't just like being pigeonholed. So by virtue of like being pigeonholed as a young Black costume designer, there's not a lot of work for you in LA, and a lot of people are going up for the same jobs, like, for example, I'm just starting out my career and I'm going up for the same jobs as someone like Ruth Carter. Mm-hmm. She's going to get the job. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it was like really, really hard here to get work because of just how things are here. And it's starting to change, there's a lot more like, Black shows and content. So there's more opportunities. And also a lot of the studios and networks are actively pushing for and looking for, Black and people of color, in my department, in my department head position of costume design. And I've heard that and I've seen it and I've been like getting more and more. Yeah. And then because of Judas, I'm getting more and more opportunities as well. Yeah. But it was really, really, really hard. I mean, I don't think I started making good money until 10 years after I started. Wow. I was doing like a lot of indie films and indie projects. And,
But you're following your dream.
But I'm following my dream.
This is what you want to do.
It's what I want to do.
You're like, no, you know, this is you know there's something at the end that you know that this is what you want to do, and this is what you love. So like
exactly.
You're like, I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah, and that's what was keeping me going, honestly.
Right.
But it was a lot of crazy moments of like economic, insecurity where I was just like, I am like a paycheck away. And it's been like that, my whole life. Like I experienced that, my mother was a single mom. So like that feeling was always there. And that's what pushes me to like work so hard. Cause I'm like, I gotta survive. Yeah. And then I'm working in an industry that is expensive, like we don't even talk about, I have to pay union dues.
And it's only like in big cities usually where you have the actual like production offices, and then, you shoot in like places like Atlanta or whatever, but
but
crazy. And the union dues.
And the union dues. The initial fees to join a union. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like these are things that are hard, I think, for people who have experienced economic insecurity their whole lives. To even like wrap your brain around, I have to pay $3,000 to become a part of an organization just so I can work. Like, you know what I mean? And so, it was really hard. I wasn't going to join the union because of that. Cause I was like, that's a lot of money. Like, oh my God. And people had to convince me. They're like, no, you'll be able to work and you need to be a part of it and blah, 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 blah. Health insurance, all these reasons. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. So I joined the union and now I'm part of two. I'm in the guild in LA and I'm in, the United Scenic Artists in New York. Mm-hmm. So that allows me to travel back and forth and work,
That's great.
Yeah. So it's great. Like, but yeah, like, economic insecurity, you just feel like you're just one bad mistake away from being homeless.
Well, I think a lot of us are. Yeah. All of us are really at the end of the day, like we're all susceptible to life issues. And especially when it comes to economic issues, this year showed us all that like we can lose our jobs really easily. The highest unemployment rates that I think the country's ever seen, or at least since the Depression. But I want to touch on though. There is a moment in your life where 6 years ago I guess I don't know if you tell me if I'm wrong, but like your lowest economically, it sounds like. And so what was going on at that point?
Yeah. So at that point, I was in a relationship with someone who was like emotionally abusive. And also, like I said, I learned this term recently, but economically abusive. Yeah. We had an account.
Sure.
And
how long was this relationship? Sorry.
We were together for like 3 years.
Okay.
And we moved here. And so we had a joint account, which is like my mistake. But we were engaged and like I thought I could trust this person,
Are they in the industry too? Are they working? Are they?
Yeah, he worked. He had a really good job.
Okay.
He made a lot more money than me. Mm-hmm. But he like spent it all.
Okay.
And also spent my money. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I was just like, what is going on? And for part of our relationship, I didn't work because I was having a hard time finding work in LA. We had just moved here.
Yeah.
And people had made a lot of promises to me before I moved here, and then I found out when I got here, like none of them were really able to like uphold their end of the bargain, or they were just talking, like LA talk,
Yeah, sure.
But I'm from New York, and like people don't really do that.
But at this point, you have a network though of people that you can turn to. Yeah.
Yeah. But I still was having a hard time finding work in LA.
That shows even more so like how difficult this industry can be.
It's very difficult.
You are already somewhat established at this point. And even then, you're having a tough time finding work. So what happens though in that economic insecurity at that point? Like just tell me what you were going through, because you describe it as homelessness, and there's so many degrees of homelessness. So what is your story in that sense? Like what was going on?
Yeah. So in my situation, I chose to walk away from a situation instead of continuing to be harmed. I realized like how it all correlated, as far as like how I felt about myself, my career, and then how this person was treating me and doing me. And so it was harming my ability to succeed, you know? And And so I chose to walk away from the situation, and I had nowhere to go.
Mm.
Um, and I had no money because he was spending all my money. So I had to call someone I barely knew and was like, "Hey, can I just crash on your couch for a while?" And I just took a suitcase.
Wow.
And she let me crash for, a couple of weeks. And then someone I had actually met through my ex-fiance,
Yeah.
she needed help actually, because she was going through a hard time, and she was like, "Can you just like give me $100 and like stay on my couch or whatever?" And
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, and I did that for a while. I stayed in Korean spas at times,
Like where you pay to be
Mhm.
overnight?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yep. I had a car, so and I had put a lot of my stuff in storage. I was able to go back to my old loft and pack up my stuff, and some friends helped me.
Yeah.
Put it, got a U-Haul for the day and put it in storage.
Wow.
So I would be back and forth to my storage, and yeah, I would have stuff in my car, like in the trunk, and I would sometimes be like going to work and would stay at the Korean spa at night, just pay like I think it was like that extra $20 overnight fee.
Wow.
And it was cheaper than a hotel, and I didn't have like
Is this like somewhere on Wilshire? Or?
Yeah, I can't remember I can't remember the name of it.
Mhm.
Oh my god, it's totally blanking.
Yeah,
But
it's okay.
I tried a couple of them, and then I found one that was
It's
like
wild.
the cleanest one.
Sure.
And even when I actually got an apartment in Hollywood, I was having trouble paying like my rent still, and I would Airbnb it and stay at the Korean spa, to like make
Yeah.
ends meet at times. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, this is interesting because I think what this touches on that we've tried to make part of this podcast is that there's such a wide spectrum of being unhoused in LA, and especially with the creative industry, there's a lot of different scales of like people who are trying to get through in the industry and experience financial hardship, and it can cause so many different types of it's not automatically being on the streets in Skid Row. It's
Right.
like literally there's a thing of like being unhoused because you can't afford to live in LA,
Right.
but you
you're
are not
working.
on the spectrum of like going and being in a tent, but you can somehow like get odd jobs. Like, so how long does it take you to get back on your feet in that way?
It took 9 months. And I only really got back on my feet because I ended up getting hired on a movie in New York. And that movie was paying me like, I think at the time like $1,500 a week. And that was like the most money I was getting paid in a while, because like I hadn't worked pretty much since January.
Yeah.
And I had been interviewing for jobs and not getting jobs, and so I was just doing like odd jobs and selling things, and selling clothes and things like that.
Weird question, but did you get things for free that you were able to like sell?
I have before, but not during this time. I think I was just like, selling clothes to consignment shops and like working on small like short films, and like, doing a lot of projects during that time to just kind of, establish my network in LA.
Yeah.
And, stuff like that. I can't, and honestly, some of this part of my life, I can't even remember what I was doing.
Wow. Because you tried to block it out as like
I was
a trauma.
just surviving, and I was just doing what I needed to do.
Wow.
So I couldn't even tell you, from the time that relationship ended and I left till me going to New York is kind of a blur. Going to New York that summer to work, it's kind of a blur. It was nuts. Just how much I was bouncing around and like living out of my car and the spas and couches and stuff like that. So thankfully I got this job in New York, a movie. It was called Little Boxes. And no one knew I was homeless at the time who worked on that project, except for I think like my supervisor, because her and I are friends. But if it wasn't for getting that movie and my best friend like paying for me to have a room in the house where he was staying for that summer, I wouldn't have been able to like save enough money to like get an apartment.
Wow.
Yeah, like if those two things, I would still, if I was, and like,
yeah,
even after that, I think I didn't get a job in LA until almost the end of that year. So I left the relationship and was couch surfing from January. He and I broke up like the 1st of January. So from the 1st of January till September, I was not able to get work in LA. But I worked in New York that summer. I came back to LA in September, got an apartment, and then I got a movie or a TV show. I think it was a TV pilot, like that October, November. So I would have been in LA, like, just like completely homeless for over a year if I didn't have friends and a network in New York where I could go back and make some money and save money, you know? Mm-hmm. So I know, and that's why when I said to you, I was like, I don't know if like I'm the right person to talk to, because my career was somewhat established before.
Well, I tried to reassure you that we're not, first off, we're not here to judge anyone's story. Right. I mean, I think that's the key, right? Like especially when you're in this space of recovery, it's like, yeah, everybody has a different story that leads them to their difficulties. But yeah, your situation though is so unique in the sense of where you've come to now as well. Right. And it's like that whole thing that I didn't even know that we were just talking about too, of like, you didn't come from any, background of the arts. You made your way, and then you even got to a place where probably you thought you had made it. Yep. And then you still you weren't in a tent. Okay. But like, it's like, there's so much to learn from that, and economic hardship and economic insecurity is a wide spectrum. And I think we should be more recognizing that we're one thing away from like being, like you're saying, one financially abusive partner, losing jobs, not having jobs, and to having to sleep overnight at a Korean spa, which sounds pretty difficult. And
it actually wasn't bad. I actually like sleeping at the Korean spas. I mean,
did anyone get any weird couches. Looks? Like, did you get?
No, because
they were cool with it.
No, surprisingly, it was the most non-judgmental space. Like, because there was a lot of women sleeping there overnight.
Seriously?
Yeah. There's a whole what? Yeah, that's why it was like
I'm shocked.
Yeah, it was one of the more comfortable spaces, and anyone who's listening to this,
it's like a hostel.
If you're in LA and you don't have a place to sleep at night, when things open back up, the Korean spa is actually like an affordable, pretty safe place, because you go in, you lock your stuff up in lockers.
Oh my God.
And then there's
it's all women too.
It's all women. It's all women. And then there's rooms where, you can sleep on the floor, and they're heated floors. There's like these really comfortable big couches that kind of are like almost beds. Yeah. And like everyone's sleeping and minding their business. Like no one's bothering you. No one's touching you. No one's talking to you. And it was
Did you think about ever going to a shelter or anything like that? Or are you thinking about like doing something other than like, or was this like, it's cheap enough? Yeah. It's comfortable. Yes. It's less expensive than a motel.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It was more that I never thought about going to a shelter.
Yeah. I mean, there's no stigma against going to a shelter, just to be clear, but like, I feel like it's a very different situation than like if you can afford the $20 or whatever it is, right. I think you're probably making that choice because you realize like that's going to be something I can afford. It's still moderately affordable, right. Anyways, so now you're 2021. Let's get a little into that. So describe to me what's going on now.
Yeah. So I costume designed a beautiful, timely, and powerful movie called Judas and the Black Messiah. And it's about the life and tragic murder of Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois Black Panther Party.
Your camera went out, so I'm just going to swap mine for yours.
And so it was a beautiful experience with an amazing cast and crew and producers, and just everything about it was amazing. Also, one of the hardest things I've ever done creatively and most gratifying. And I think it really shows in the work and how beautiful the movie came out, because I feel like we all put our all into it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so for it to be recognized the way it has been recognized, it's just amazing. It's nominated for 6 Academy Awards in several categories, including screenplay, cinematography, and 2 Best Supporting Actors.
Mm-hmm.
And Daniel Kaluuya, the lead, has won like pretty much every award he's been nominated for that movie, which is beautiful to witness because he deserves it. He put his everything and all into that role. And took it very, very seriously, as we all did. We took the story very, very seriously. So it's been an amazing year. I mean, one that when I was like struggling, it was things that I dreamed of happening. You know what I mean? I was like, I would love to, costume design an Oscar award, winning film or nominated film. I would love to be nominated for an Oscar one day. Like you get into this industry and you have these dreams and you're like, that would be cool, and I'm not going to say that everything I was doing was like trying to force it to happen, but it's always been in the back of my mind, like it would be cool to be recognized for my work and nominated for awards and, have praise and accolades for like all the cool shit that I'm doing and it would be great to be recognized for it.
Yeah.
And, so for it to be actually happening, it's just like some days I'm just like, what? Because, going from not being able to get work in LA to like getting all these scripts and people wanting to talk to me, it's such a trip, It's
amazing.
Like such a like.
So right now you're in a moment where your work is coming to you.
Yeah. Like I'm not having to like beg people to see me or beg people to like, consider me for a meeting anymore.
Right.
It's like, wow, like shit has changed.
But I have to imagine though, with your life experience, like it's hard to probably think that this couldn't be, fleeting and give perspective to like not get caught in the traps of fame or success.
Mm-hmm.
And has that given you that perspective of like what?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like my priorities are very different and I'm grounded in a way that I probably wouldn't have been if I didn't experience the things that I experienced.
Right.
Like I'm a lot more grateful for all the small things, because a lot of people, as we spoke about like before we started recording, are like, you should have got nominated for this and you should have got that and da. And I'm just like, I'm just happy to be here, like, I'm just happy that like, my work resonated with people. I'm happy about the people who contact me who are strangers who are touched by my work.
Right.
Like those are the things that I'm grateful for. Like awards are cool and I'm super grateful that like, I was nominated by my peers.
Somebody reached out to you from our post.
Yeah.
I think that's worth recognizing. Yeah. Like your story is so impactful now that people are reaching out to you because they want to learn from your life circumstances.
Yeah.
And hopefully this podcast can show people that they too, I think it's a good learning lesson that they too can persevere.
Yes.
And like their life can give you some curveballs, but like it's still worth to keep going. Yeah.
Keep going after your dreams and what you want. Yeah.
And that you probably are coming out of the end of this with way more of a great story to tell than I think, you have there's a lot more. You have a true persona is I think the real way to describe it. It's like, a lot of people probably can't relate to that, especially in your career. I'm assuming there's a lot of, or just Hollywood in general. I mean, there's just a lot of people who, Hollywood has a lot of diverse backgrounds in terms of financial hardship, but it's, I don't think your story is definitely very unique. And so now, this week, can you tell me a little bit about what you're feeling and like how you're feeling about the next phase of your career? And so what's your thoughts now?
I mean, this week is just really, really surreal, and
I can't imagine.
And it's exciting because, I mean, like I said, it's like complete. I always get this mixed up. Is it 360 or 180?
That's interesting.
I
I don't
was
know. It
mixing it
depends
up.
what the outcome is that you're saying.
Well, it's
360 would be end up right where you started.
No, okay, so it's a 180.
Yeah.
It's a complete 180. Thank you. I always get that mixed up.
Yeah.
It's a complete 180 for me, and in like the biggest way, right? That's why I wrote the tweet, because I'm like,
it could be a 720. You do two or anyway 540.
540.
You go around once, and then you go halfway around again, and then you're in a completely opposite because we're talking about all the ups and downs. So it's a 540.
It's a 540.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I like that. So yeah, it's a 540 for me because as we talked about, the tweet that I tweeted, I did not expect it to go viral. And the tweet I said, 6 years ago, I was, homeless in LA, and now, and this is paraphrasing it, and now I'm a costume designer of an Oscar nominated film. Yeah. Because it's such a huge contrast. It's surreal. And I'm like, and I had to sit down and I was like, wait, what? Like how did I do that? I had to figure out how I did it. Yeah. And I sat with myself and I was like, wow, you did that. Like, you really did that. You really persevered and pushed through and like changed your life.
Do you do therapy or things like that?
Yeah, I do therapy. Therapy definitely helps. And like I said, asking for help.
Is this something you talk about regularly? Like, is this something in your therapy session?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to disclose, obviously, but like this moment of like really processing how this all, because what it felt to me was like somebody really reflecting. Yeah. And is that the feeling going through your mind like these last few months?
Yeah. I mean, when I wrote that tweet, that was a deep moment of reflection when I wrote that out. Yeah. It was kind of the first time I realized it and said it out loud. Yeah. Because like all these things have been happening, but I didn't fully like connect the dots from what happened to me 6 years ago to where I am now.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
I didn't connect the dots at all until I sat down and, like I said, I had done some healing work and plant ceremonies, and I've just been having to do some work around like reclaiming my power, because there's been so many things that have knocked me down and knocked me back working in this industry, relationships. You know what I'm saying? Like there's so many things that happen to us that tell us we're not enough and tell us we're not worth. Tell us about our worth, and our worth is less, the color of our skin, like everything, right? Yeah. And so I've been doing a lot of work around that, unpacking that and getting rid of that because it's not true. Yeah. A lot of those stories that people are saying to us and putting on us, they're not true, but it affects how we move through the world and how we see ourselves and the decisions we make. And that shit definitely correlates to economic insecurity, in my opinion. Right. All of it is connected. The self-worth, like all of it. It's like I can talk about this for days.
No, it's really fascinating because you really have an authentic perspective on it, and I'm fascinated by it. I think, what would you say to younger people though, if you were to put yourself back in your shoes as that 18-year-old moving out of suburbia, like to a big city, getting accepted to art school, not knowing anything about that industry, where you want to take you, what would you say to somebody about it picking and following this path?
I would say to myself, like, like be more demanding, like know your worth and take up way more space. That's what I would say to myself, because those are the things that, if we're talking specifically about, economics, like doing those things is what helps you to not be in these moments of economic insecurity as much. Because a lot of times I was doubting my worth, I was doubting myself, I was scared to like do X, Y, and Z thing because so many people had told me I wasn't good enough. I couldn't do that, Right. Even with having experience in a resume, like even the people representing me at the time, my agents who were supposed to be like championing for me would be like, well, you just don't have enough on your resume, and you don't have this, and you don't have that, and you can't. And it's, it was never like, hey, let's build you up and get you to a place where you can, And so I would tell anyone, myself, my younger self, like, don't listen to none of that shit, just do what you came here to do, right? And like be unapologetic about it. Don't shrink yourself, like just go even, and I did go hard after my dreams, but go even harder, go even harder. Wow. And There's so much stacked against us, I think, as women, as people of color,
Yeah.
as Black people specifically,
Right. Right.
to make us feel like we don't deserve a lot of things, and
Yeah.
we can't have a lot of things, and that, we're not good enough.
Right.
And it all completely affects
Mhm.
our economic, bottom lines. It really does.
Is there anything that you specifically support when it comes to initiatives or movements that are occurring within your industry to shift that? Because I know there's been a lot of talk this year. Is there anything that you're a part of, or sorry.
Yeah, so I'm a part of like my guild's diversity committee, and so far I've had a hand in curating conversations, so people of different marginalized groups can have a voice. So I helped to plan a series of panels, and they went really, really well. The last one we just did was for the LGBTQIA plus community. So that's been really great to work with my guild and to see them wanting to do this work. And,
that's great.
Yeah. So that's been encouraging. It's been very, very encouraging. And then also my guild is fighting for pay equity now for
huge
women,
thing.
in the industry. So those two things, I'm really proud that, the organization that I'm a part of is like spearheading these initiatives, and, and I'm able to like work on them as I have
that's
time.
awesome. You're at a different phase in your career where you can like be the voice. Yeah.
And then me personally, I've started a database for Black designers to connect them to costume designers, to encourage costume designers to use Black designers' work on screen.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's
cool.
my own personal initiative that I've been doing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, congrats. You must be really proud of that. That's really cool. Cool. I mean, I think we pretty much like this is a really enlightening conversation. I think to so many people, I think there's one side of Hollywood, and I think we're showing that there's so many ways people can break through in Hollywood, and so many journeys that people can take and still get to this phase where you are now, and you're in a place where you can share that. So thank you for sharing your time, and thank you for helping. I think your voice lends a big your voice can help those going through this currently, and I think that's a key thing. In LA, we work with so many people who are dealing with different levels of economic hardship. But LA has so many creative people who are dealing with those levels of economic hardship. And I think it's not just celebrities and those stories that we see. And I think this is what's going to help those people that are really trying to get through and don't know if there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you for being candid about that and willing to be vulnerable, because that's awesome. Anyways, it's been a good one. Thank you.
No, thanks for having me. And I just want to say also, for the people who aren't like experiencing economic hardship in this industry, please advocate for people of color. Please be an ally. Please advocate for your team getting more pay, because you just never know like what your PAs and assistants are dealing with.
Right. So
if you can get them more money, like just get them more money. And all that is important. Like there's so many different ways to be, allies. Like as a department head, I look out for the assistants, because I was an assistant and I know what that's like. So it's like, this is what you do to get more money. You can ask for more money. You can negotiate your own pay, and these are things I didn't know that I wish I knew when I was in those states of like PAing and having economic hardship.
Right. And I think the thing that we've learned is like the collective voice is so much stronger. And if everybody realizes as an assistant level, they can demand to get paid. Arguably, assistants, they should be making like 30 an hour, but they're like really making like, because that's what an executive assistant really can make. It's like 30, 40, but it's like, in Hollywood, they're just going to pay them like 15, 14, 13. But if everybody said it and everybody was just like, no, I'm not going to take this like inhumane wage, we would actually make progress. And, but it takes people like yourself to advocate for that.
Like we all, if you're in a position of power, like you have to advocate for people.
Right.
And I'm just now getting into that kind of position of power where I can advocate in these ways, and I do, because I was that person, so I needed someone to advocate for me.
And now you haven't forgotten, which is like the Hollywood story. It's just like forget where you came from, forget like just push everybody out of the way that's trying to come up, because there's only so many spots. Everybody can eat. I think that's the thing that we learned from our last podcast.
Streaming now.
Everybody can eat.
So much work now.
If everybody remembers the last podcast, that's what the founder of Born and Raised was saying. It's like cool. Everybody can eat. Like there's enough food out here. Yeah. Well, food is not a good term, but like there's enough out here for everybody to have something on their plate. And absolutely. So let's not forget that.
Yeah. So, absolutely.
Anyways, thank you.
Well, thank you.